These old ladies are in trance, possessed by spirits which give new and vigorous life to their aged bodies. Younger women act as their attendants and make offerings at the altar dedicated to the spirits. The spirits are those of heroes and gods, and they come from the mountains and fields of Vietnam. But the fields in which their devotees now labor are not Vietnamese rice paddies, but the fields and vineyards of southern France. Saint-Livrade, a small town 100 miles east of Bordeaux. Vietnamese people have been living here since 1956, when the French, who had been fighting for years to keep a grip on their Southeast Asian empire, were finally defeated at Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam. When the French left, many Vietnamese, who would have been persecuted or killed by the new communist regime, left as well and settled here. That was nearly a quarter of a century ago. Now a whole generation of them have grown up knowing no other land than these cool and verdant valleys of France. But others in this community, with the aid of their guardian spirits, still live in their imaginations on the banks of the Mekong. When the refugees first arrived, the French gave them these old army barracks to live in. It would be difficult to imagine anything less like the small, informal, intimate cluster of bamboo huts that constitutes a village back in Vietnam. Inside the rectangular rooms, chairs, sideboard, tables, curtains, piano, the television set, nearly everything is completely European. But one end of the house could be part of Vietnam itself. The family calls this their pagoda. It's the shrine where the spirits are worshipped. The little dolls and animals that hang all over it represent the spirits of nature or are gifts to them. Some have been made by members of the household. Some were bought in the local toy shop and converted into oriental spirits with bits of ribbon and judicious dabs of makeup. Only one or two came from the Far East, imported by way of Hong Kong. Here, the grandmother of the family, Madame Caz, who is one of the senior trance mediums in the cult, keeps the costumes that belong to the spirits and the paraphernalia she needs for their worship.
Pour commencer, pour l'esprit qui rentre dans son âme, alors, met ça sur la tête.
Sur la tête.
Mais dans le trance, Madame mettait sur les vêtements
sur le corps.
Oui.
Et la tête, après, alors, l'esprit sera rentré.
Đến cậu đệ nhất cũng chưa có.
Comme là.
Et qu'est-ce que c'est?
Là, c'est princesse numéro 6.
Numéro 6.
Numéro 6.
Ouais. Et combien des esprits?
Une douzaine de princesses.
Une douzaine?
Oui, une douzaine.
Non, c'est...
12 quan, 12 chầu. Đấy.
Là, c'est princesse numéro 3.
Numéro 3. Xanh con. Đấy. Đấy, cái không có cái mặt vàng này. Đấy.
Et là?
Ça c'est quatrième.
C'est quatrième.
Quatrième, le roi.
Le roi,
roi
aussi?
toujours, oui, roi, quatrième roi. Là. Oui.
A bird table? No, it bears offerings for the spirits. It stands beside one of the army huts that externally looks identical to all the rest in Saint-Livrade barracks. Inside, it's very different. This shrine serves as a place for Buddhist worship, but it's also the focus of the spirit cult. Ceremonies are held here almost every day, and they all start with prayers. Today is a special day. It's the birthday of the Dragon King spirit, Duk Voi Cha Bat Hai, who also bears the impressive title of Father of Mandarins and Princes, King of the Palace of Waters, Supreme Master of Clouds, Rain and Lightning. Buddha is seated among images of the spirits, for Buddhist deities are also part of the trance worshippers' pantheon. A bodhisattva, one who cares for mankind, presides over spirits of the sky, mountains and water. Below them, 5 mandarins, and at the bottom, 4 princesses. In a neighboring hut, there are images from yet another religion, Christianity. A few of the people have been converted to Christianity since they settled here, but most were Catholics before they came, for the faith was preached by French missionaries in Vietnam with great fervor and energy for over a century, and millions followed it. For these people, Europe and the Orient have already merged to some degree. The liturgy they use is neither French nor Latin, but Vietnamese. Their Christian faith was the reason why many of these people had to leave Vietnam. The communists promised that they would allow people to worship as they wished, but it was not so. All religions were disapproved of, but Christianity, being a foreign faith, was especially hated, and its followers were systematically persecuted. Everything was done to make its practice as difficult as possible. Local administrators would discover when Mass was to be held, and then arrange for the distribution of rice to take place at that precise time, so that the Christians had the choice of abandoning their worship or going hungry. These people chose to keep their faith and leave their country. Christians, Buddhists, spirit worshippers, they're all cared for by the doctor at the camp.
Qui m'a été offerte dans un but bien précis, vraisemblablement dans celui de m'inspirer dans ma réflexion à l'égard de la pose d'un diagnostic. Et les fidèles ont l'habitude, tous les soirs, de venir changer les fleurs, d'y mettre des bâtons d'encens et d'appeler la bénédiction des génies sur votre serviteur. Je crois que cette différence repose essentiellement sur la conviction que chaque communauté peut mettre dans la religion qu'elle pratique, et je suis formellement convaincu et profondément ancré dans cette idée que les gens qui pratiquent le bouddhisme s'imposent d'abord une ascèse, c'est-à-dire une discipline, qui, je pense, doit les aider, doit les marquer dans la lutte contre la maladie. Et c'est une chose qu'on ne retrouve pas, je dois le dire, parce que je le pense sincèrement, dans notre petite communauté catholique, qui vit d'ailleurs de façon parfaitement cordiale et familière avec l'autre communauté. Il n'y a pas du tout d'antagonisme.
However that may be, the spirit cult is dying. Out of the 400 Vietnamese living in the camp now, only about 50 still practice the rituals, and most of them are very old. Madame Caz is 84, and she's anxious that her 26-year-old granddaughter, Cecile, should learn how to summon the spirits and seek their aid. Cecile herself is an accountant in a large company in Paris, and she comes down here largely to please her grandmother. She's the only one of her generation who is interested in the cult. Even so, neither she nor her grandmother can tell whether she'll be able to reach the spirits through trance. The spirits do not accept everyone. One of the old ladies, with the red cloth draped over her head, prepares to receive a spirit. From the way she behaves now, her attendants will know which of the dozen spirits that regularly visit her has arrived. It's the number 2 Mandarin. Quickly, her attendants search for the appropriate clothes. The old lady begins to smoke. That is an indication that the spirit possessing her is a man. Through the agency of the old lady, the spirit hospitably offers a little money and cigarettes to his devotees. Everyone must smoke now, or else the Mandarin will be offended. The red cloth is replaced. The Mandarin has disappeared, and another spirit is about to take his place. Clothes must be changed. A new arrival, the princess who rows the souls of the dead across the lake of heaven to the shores of paradise. And now, the great warrior who defended Vietnam against Kublai Khan 600 years ago. It is not perhaps surprising that, as the doctor has observed, people with such a deep faith as these should retain their zest and vivacity longer than those who have none and who feel themselves dispossessed in an alien land. The spirits certainly keep Vietnam vividly alive in the minds of their devotees, for they sing of its lakes and mountains, and they tell stories of its heroes and kings. But the cults, which were once widespread in Vietnam, are now almost dead there. The new Vietnam frowns on them as on other religions, and here in Saint-Livrade, in spite of Madame Cars's concern to pass on the faith, the interest of the young people is slight. They're more concerned with France, where they will spend their future, than in their parents' past. When these sprightly old ladies are gone, the spirits will almost certainly disappear with them. Saint-Livrade is not by any means the only Vietnamese settlement in France. Paris also has a large community. But whereas the Saint-Livrade people came from North Vietnam, many of those in Paris are from the south and arrived only recently. Last year, Cécile brought her grandmother up to Paris, and for the first time in over 20 years, the old lady met some new Vietnamese faces. Phan An and her husband, Vo Van Ai, are among the leaders of the Paris group. Both are devout Buddhists and passionate believers in non-violence. They resisted the French when they ruled their country, and now they're campaigning tirelessly for the release of political prisoners held by the communists. Many of the younger generation already choose to talk French among themselves. Vo Van Ai, Phan An and their children live in a suburb in the north of Paris. There, helped by a Yorkshire girl, Penny Faulkner, they run a small printing works. The press produces brochures, timetables, pamphlets, forms, catalogues, any job they can get, but only during weekdays. At the weekend, they print in Vietnamese. Quê Mê, the words mean motherland, is a fortnightly magazine containing essays, poems, news about refugees, and reports smuggled out from Vietnam. If people can't afford to buy it, they get it free. In some communities, copies are passed from hand to hand, each reader being given just an hour to read it before passing it on. It's just one way in which Vo Van Ai tries to keep alive the ideals which he believes communism is set on destroying.
The Vietnamese tradition is based on love, comprehension, compassion, and knowledge. And communism ideology based on hate, on war. You can see where there is a war, the communist ideology can develop. But where there is low comprehension, the communist ideology cannot develop. So that is a conflict, between love and hate.
But communism, a communist would say that it is based on love for his fellow man, communism.
But that means love under his party. That means they impose their love, but they do not try to develop love from the heart of mankind. That is the difference.
And were therefore the communists in Vietnam against the artists? Did they prevent them from speaking freely?
Because they do not accept the free thinking, They must impose their point of view, and they do not give us the liberty to express our opinion. So that is the reason why when they take over the South Vietnam by the military forces, they began to arrest all writers, poets, intellectuals, and they imprison them in the concentration camps or prison. Because they know that if such artists or intellectual or poet continue to create, to write, that means continue to develop the Vietnamese cultural, they cannot impose the Stalinist, Marxist ideology on our culture.
The communists now control the whole of Vietnam, both north and south. At least the war that tortured the country for so long is now over, and the people are once again working in the fields. But the return was not easy. Whole villages had been annihilated. The complex irrigation systems essential for rice growing and built up over generations had been totally destroyed. Many farmers who had been driven from their land by the tide of war feared to return to their fields in case they still contained mines or unexploded shells and bombs. Yet in many parts of the country, the return has been made. Saigon, once the capital of South Vietnam, has been renamed Ho Chi Minh City. Many predicted that when the communists took over, there would be a bloodbath, but it didn't happen. Instead, people were systematically re-educated to rid them of their capitalist ideas and teach them communist ones, and the city still flourishes. Before the communist takeover, some 90% of the country was Buddhist. The number who still follow the faith is tiny. Refugees say that the handful of monks that still exist are allowed to survive only to be displayed to foreigners. Farther north in the country, on the banks of the perfumed river, stands the ancient capital, Hue. The dominant outside influence in Vietnam has always been its immense northerly neighbor, China. And the pagoda in Hue, with its peaked eaves and glazed tiles, owes a lot to Chinese influence. Hue, standing close to the border that once divided North from South Vietnam, was the scene of some of the most savage fighting and the most intense bombardments. Miraculously, a great deal of the city survives, and its ancient buildings are being carefully restored. This work is being done in the old palace, which is in fact an almost exact copy of buildings that stand in the imperial city in Peking. And indeed, Vietnam was annexed by China and ruled by Chinese mandarins for many centuries. The country today sees its ally as Russia and its official philosophy as Marxist. But Chinese influence on Vietnamese culture has been pervasive and profound. Although the language spoken by the Vietnamese is quite different from Chinese, they borrowed Chinese characters in order to write it down. These inscriptions on the palace walls at Hue, alternating with decorative panels, again painted in typical Chinese style, are about 100 years old. But this way of writing continued to be used until the turn of the century, when under Western influence the style was officially abandoned in favor of Roman letters. The war left behind it 800,000 children, abandoned or orphaned. They are inevitably being brought up in institutions and are being trained in communist ways. Buddhist teaching, that once would have been a central part of their education, is totally forbidden. They are told that the family is of no consequence. Many have lost their parents anyway. Those that have a father or mother are taught that they should denounce their parents to authority if they see them doing anything that breaks the communist rules. The tragedy of war created a chance of rearing a new generation with little knowledge or allegiance to the past. Communism is taking full advantage of that opportunity. Chinese influence extends to entertainment too. Jugglers and acrobats have always been hugely popular, and mercifully they have no ideological implications. The country's Russian allies occasionally send their own stars to perform here too. Side by side with these modern entertainments, there are more ancient forms which are still very popular. This is hat chow, which began in the 11th century. It's based on folk songs and dances. The stories involve a great deal of social satire, and because of that and the play's peasant origins, hat chow is supported officially, and the plots given a bias to support Marxist ideas. This is a satire on feudal attitudes to sex. The woman, overwhelmed by the troubles of the world, has disguised herself as a monk and taken refuge in a monastery. But there she meets another woman who falls in love with her.
Hẳn vô tình thế mới kêu ngươi, vì hiểu ý nên rằng hoàng mắt, chứ có biết đâu mình đây cũng chỉ là đây rồi nha. Đừng có chơi với em nữa. Thôi bỏ mê Phật đi. Thì Đà Phật, con bông tôi ra để tôi quét chùa kẻo thương người phở mắt. Đưa trời đi em quét cho. Rồi em nói chuyện này cho mà nghe. Này thầy Tiểu ơi, cứ sao cho sạch trần hỷ duyên giữa tôi làm thầy Tiểu ơi, ăn với em một miếng trầu. Rồi đưa trời đây em quét cho. Này. Thì gió ở đâu ấy? Chạy từ bao giờ rồi ấy? Thế có tức không? Mình đã nắm được tầm tay thầy Tiểu rồi. Thế mà còn chạy được. Lô nhang xa nhiệt tạp tới muôn chư Phật này ôi tất sang văn thủy cứ kết tương văn. Đà Phật, chào cô Linh Trì. A Di Đà Phật. Bảo của An Quốc Lâm. A Di Đà. Tôi đã đèn mời cô vào đấy.
There are also newer forms of theatre. This ballet troupe tells the story of the war and the way it ended. These are the Americans and, inevitably, the villains. Their victim, a beautiful peasant woman. Plays with such a clear propagandist message are only one of the ways in which the government is controlling life and thought in Vietnam. Vo Van Ai believes that the crucial elements of his country's culture are now on the brink of extermination. asked him if he thought they would survive, and if so, where.
On one hand, in the heart of our people in Vietnam, silently they continue, you know, this culture, and in outside of Vietnam, like we here, Vietnamese community, a kind of center of cultural, Vietnamese cultural in Paris. We continue to preserve our culture, not only to preserve, but to develop, to continue, because I think that all Vietnamese think that they will be back soon in Vietnam. So we must help them to keep this culture.
So Vo Van Ai's paper, Quê Mai, continues to print the work of poets and politicians, writers and philosophers. He himself also lectures tirelessly in order to gain help for the causes he believes in. In 1968, he spoke at a Quaker meeting in York. A girl who heard him decided to go and help him for a year at his printing press. 12 years later, she's still there, speaking Vietnamese and co-editing the paper. Penny Faulkner.
The real purpose of the newspaper is how to keep alive Vietnamese traditions, so that when they do go back to Vietnam, nothing will be lost, the language, culture and so on. And that's very important because it's difficult to keep culture alive when you're out of the country, when you've been cut off with the roots. So with the newspaper, we try to encourage young people to write, people to keep up speaking and using the Vietnamese language to create poetry, and alongside the newspaper we organise cultural evenings and so on, so that musicians, poets, artists can keep up and continue to create in the traditions of the Vietnamese culture.
A yard beside the printing works has been turned into a community hall where there are regular concerts.
Cháu ơi, ngoại khóc đây không phải là ngoại khóc tuổi buồn cho thân ngoại, mà ngoại khóc đây là ngoại khóc cho 50 triệu dân mình. Hơn ngàn ngày khổ sở điêu linh vì những kẻ vô thần. Nay nạn bão lụt làm thiệt hại mùa màng ruộng lúa, người dân Việt đã đói khổ, nay lại càng đói khổ nhiều hơn. Thế mà những người tự xưng là lãnh đạo.
The words of this song are taken straight from a letter written by an old lady in Vietnam to her granddaughter in France, whom she's never seen.
Họ chỉ lo việc xua quân, xâm lấn nước láng giềng cho thỏa mộng cuồng xâm. Ngày con đi, ngoại tiễn chân con bằng nước mắt. Nay ngoại viết thơ này bằng máu của con tim, máu của muôn dân đang sống trong tuổi nhục căm hờn, chỉ mong có một ngày được tẩy thù rửa hận. Chốn hải ngoại xa xôi, con hãy cố truyền đi những lời của ngoại.
This is mid-February, the Vietnamese New Year, the most important of all annual festivals, the equivalent of our Christmas. By tradition, the oldest member of the community distributes presents to the children. Vo Van Ai throws Li Si, coins wrapped in red paper, the colour of happiness.
Các cháu nói cảm ơn bác.
Bình an nha.
Cảm ơn bác.
Được cái nào nhớ lấy lần thôi nha.
Cảm ơn bác.
Lấy đầu lôi xuống.
Lôi xuống, lôi xuống.
Huang Lan, who sang the first song, sings again, this time with her husband Chi Tam. They were both stars of the opera in Vietnam.
Phi hùng hỡi anh ơi, nay mình phải chia tay. Anh hãy lên đường chiến đấu, nơi cố hương em chờ.
Người yêu ơi, nay sắp son đời chờ, anh quyết đem thanh bình trở về quê hương.
Tiếng anh cất bước yên tâm chiến đấu liếng lưu mà chi nước non thắm sầu hãy đem trí tài. Nay đành phải chia tay, anh hãy yên lòng chiến đấu, nơi cố hương em chờ.
Người yêu ơi, hãy sắp son đời chờ, anh quyết đem thanh bình trở về quê hương.
Phi hùng anh hãy ra đi, hãy yên tâm cất bước nơi quê nhà, em vẫn chờ anh.
Mỹ Chi ơi, dòng suối bạc đất Nghệ An, quê hương của Mỹ Chi người tôi yêu mến. Nửa mảnh trăng thề đang lơ lửng trên không trung, hãy chừng dám cho kẻ gì nặng gánh non sông, nên đành xem nhẹ hai chữ ân tình.
Chi Tam, Huang Lan and their baby son now live in one room with a share of a kitchen in a block of flats on the outskirts of Paris. They know that if the language and music which mean so much to them is to survive, the next generation must care for it. So they make sure that their son learns Vietnamese before he learns French. If he doesn't, he's unlikely ever to be at home in his own country, the land of his ancestors.
Đi đâu? Vắng nhà. Chú chuột. Đi chợ. Đường xa.
Việt Nam muôn năm. Việt Nam. Việt Nam.
Hỏi thăm. Chú
chuột.
Đi đâu?
Bầu câu. Cá bóng mà. Chặt đầu.
French scholarly institutions are also doing their best to help the cultural traditions of Vietnam to survive. The Musée de l'Homme, the Museum of Mankind, has had a special department studying exotic music for many years. Trang Quang Hai works there, studying the museum's collection of Asian instruments.
How long does the sound go on for?
Well, maybe that's very long, but I never counted.
What is this instrument?
Well, this instrument is the monochord, and it is called in Vietnamese đàn độc huyền. That means the unique string instrument.
Beautiful. Can you show me what you do with your left hand?
Well, with the left hand, I just put the hand towards the left-hand side or the right-hand side, so I can modify the tension of the string, and hence the pitch. For example,
Beautiful. And what is that instrument with many strings?
yes, this instrument is called đàn tranh in Vietnamese, And it is a koto-like zither.
A koto, like the
Koto,
Japanese koto.
yes.
Yeah.
And it has 16 strings, and you can find this instrument in China, in Japan, in Korea, in Mongolia.
But in Vietnam, is it special?
In Vietnam, it's very special in the manner that we use the left hand more than in other countries. For example, if you play each string like this, if you play just the string without the ornamentation, is quite common, like the harp.
Yeah.
But if we use the left hand, for example, there are three main ways of using the ornamentation. Vibrato. And now to change the pitch.
And what about the scale?
Well, there are two main scales. The first one is called the pentatonic scale without semitone, and it is called in Vietnamese the Bach mode, expressing joy. And there's the second one, and I just moved the two pitches like this. And this scale expressing the sadness.
Play me something joyful.
Yeah. And the piece is called the flowing water.
Over recent months, the number of refugees fleeing from Vietnam, the boat people, has dramatically increased. At one time, 50,000 a month were leaving their country. The Vietnamese community in Paris, very poor themselves, decided to raise money to equip boats for those who were being refused sanctuary by neighboring countries and to bring them to France. So they hired a theatre just off the Champs-Élysées and put on a concert. The first part of the program was a display of martial arts put on by a group from Toulon. After watching such performances as these, many French people have decided to take up this discipline themselves, and several are taking part in this display.
Thiết ra một những thế tát.
Tran Quang Hai accompanies his wife, Bach Yen, on the sapek.
Thấy bạn đường xa hái hoa cho kéo, hoa nào leo héo thì hãy bỏ đi, chứ để làm chi hoa tan. Tering tering ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tering tering ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting.
Gió thổi từ xa cánh hoa phơi phới, yêu làn là hương mới chẳng nỡ bỏ hoa. Gió thổi từ xa hoa cười.
Tering tering ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tering tering ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting. Bướm đẹp vần hoa, bướm mòn ở đôi má, hoa nào còn thương nhớ thì chóng già nua. Bướm chỉ nhận nhớ hoa sâu. Tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting.
Lũ trẻ đổ hoa nhắc qua ở thông tiết, hoa nào còn tình tiết còn thiếu tình duyên, chờ để vườn tiên
hoa tan. Tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting ting, tiring tiring ting tang tang, tarang tirang ting ting. Đặt nền cao bể sâu nhờ bởi ô tang từng tang ai đào ô tang sâu nếm sâu tình lạ sâu nếm sâu ô tang tình tang tình tang tình ô tang ai đem con sào răng sông để cho con sào ô tang tình tang sâu ô tang xa bay xa tình lạ xa bay xa ô tang tình tang tình tang tình ô tang ô tang.
Tran Quang Hai is such a gifted musician, he can make music with almost anything, even European spoons. Now a performance of Kai Luong, one of the Vietnamese favorite forms of entertainment. The style is only about 50 years old in terms of music and dialogue, but the stories it tells come from Vietnamese history and deal with the people's heroic resistance to the Chinese invaders from the north. A brutal Chinese general has fallen in love with a Vietnamese girl and arrested her lover.
Đánh thêm nữa. Dạ của dân Nam, tấm xương phơi nắng, dày lắm, đánh thêm nữa. Sao? Thế nào? Dạ ngươi có chịu khai chưa? Hả? Không. Hỏi Liễu Thắng, nhà ngươi đã lầm. Nước Nam này tuy nhỏ bé nhưng người dân Nam luôn luôn nuôi chí kiêu hùng.
The actor who plays the girl's father was famous in the Saigon theatre. He's only just arrived in France, and this is the first time he's given a performance.
Suốt đời lão chỉ có một đứa con duy nhất, nó mồ côi mẹ từ phở nằm nôi. Lão đã từng dạy con, dầu hoàn cảnh nào cũng đừng quên mình là giống dòng lạc Việt. Vì cây kia có cội, còn nước kia nọ có nguồn. Bổn phận làm người đừng bao giờ quên ơn tổ quốc.
Cha ơi, những lời cha dạy từ thuở con còn thơ. Đến nay con đã trưởng thành nhưng con vẫn hằng ghi tâm tạc dạ. Nhưng đứng trước hoàn cảnh này, con xin cha hãy hiểu cho con.
Hiểu cho bà. Làm sao tôi hiểu cho bà được trong khi trước mắt tôi nhìn thấy bà sống trong vàng son nhung lụa, vừa nghe những anh qua đăng rực rỡ muôn màu. Trời ơi, thịt béo rượu ngon đã làm cho bà quên đi nghe chủng tộc giống ma loài. Phu nhân.
Tôi giết cha tôi.
Phu nhân.
The old man, horrified at seeing his daughter apparently living with the Chinese general, commits suicide by biting his tongue.
Phu nhân ơi, ai tên gì phu nhân? Phu nhân, ai tên gì phu nhân? Trời ơi, phu nhân, chết con rồi đó, ai phu nhân ơi, phu nhân ơi,
How long do you think you will be able to keep alive the culture here outside Vietnam before it dies in Vietnam?
It's very difficult. I cannot say that because you know that the culture of one nation began with the language. And if we do not live together, the language will be dead. You know, we lose days and days some words. We cannot create a new word. And as you see, we are now in the world, in the States, Asia, Australia, France, but we are not together. So we have only one magazine to try to develop that. But if we stay too long outside of Vietnam, I fear that the culture of Vietnam will be dead. So that is the reason why we must engage not only to develop the culture, but to find a way to come back to Vietnam. Because the cause of this death of culture is not only the problem of economic or cultural, but this is a political problem. So long this regime in Vietnam is there, we cannot develop, we cannot preserve our nation, our culture. So, and sometimes we must engage in the political way. For example, to defend of the human rights in Vietnam, or to save the life of the both people. And all of these action is a political action in the great sense. And I think that is very important.
Chung dương nào đã chia lìa đôi vợ chồng con, chung dương con thêm cắt rời cha mẹ và con. Chung dương nào hay chế độ nào đầy con người vô kiếp nghẹn ngào, kiếp xa nhau. Nhớ đôi tay em xưa xinh như mộng, tay vuốt tóc chồng, tay nựng con thơ. Nhớ đôi môi em, ôi đôi môi mộng, ca hát cho đời thêm sắc thêm hương. Ở bên nhà đôi tay ngà em vục buồn đen, ở bên nhà đôi môi mềm thu vạn tội oan. Ở bên này sống với ác mộng, từng đêm ngày anh ra biển rộng khóc thương em. Chung dương nào đã chia lìa đôi vợ chồng con, chung dương con thêm cắt rời cha mẹ và con. Chung dương nào hay chế độ nào đầy con người vô kiếp nghẹn ngào, kiếp xa nhau. Nhớ đôi tay em xưa xinh như mộng, tay vuốt tóc chồng, tay nựng con thơ. Nhớ đôi môi em, ôi đôi môi mộng, ca hát cho đời thêm sắc thêm hương. Ở bên nhà đôi tay ngà em vục buồn đen, ở bên nhà đôi môi mềm thu vạn tội oan. Ở bên này sống với ác mộng, từng đêm ngày anh ra biển rộng khóc thương em. Ở bên nhà em không còn đứng chờ đợi anh, đợi anh về anh hôn vào mắt nàng màu nhung. Ở bên nhà em đi lao động, ở bên này anh ra biển rộng ngoài chung dương. Ở bên nhà em không còn đứng chờ đợi anh, ở bên này anh căm thù lũ công.